Okay, all the background noise, please, Reverend.
Jesse Jackson.
Hey, hey, everybody. Welcome to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. It's Sunday, March 21st. Happy spring, everybody. 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. We are going to be talking about the rising tide of hatred, violence against our Asian American brothers and sisters, the AAPI community. Want to know what you think about it? Are these hate crimes? Hey, is it Mujahid? How are you? And Lila and Makiba and Shirley from Philadelphia and Linda and Tyrion and Carol out there in California. So many of you. Thank you so much for being with us. And please like and share, like and share, like and share. We want to get your thoughts on what about this tragedy down in Georgia this past week. We want to talk about this. We've seen a rising tide of violence against the AAPI community and the Asian community globally. We've seen a sharp uptick, particularly since the pandemic began, with all of the racialized, racist, quite frankly, rhetoric about the Asian community coming out of this pandemic, coming out of China. And we've heard so much, even though we first saw the spike coming out of Italy. That having been said, Asians have been attacked all over the world. And we saw something in the United States, that the culmination of which was just absolutely devastating. 8 people killed. 6 of the persons killed were Asian American women. And law enforcement has said this is not a hate crime yet. So, what do you think about that? What are the determinants for a hate crime? We want to know. Call us at 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673, 1-866-5. Oh my goodness, 594-4673. I want to know what you think. 7 of the 8 persons killed were women. 6 of those persons were Asian American. As the nation clamors for answers, we've seen something very interesting. We saw the Georgia Cherokee County spokesman, the sheriff's spokesman, Jay Baker. He said that Robert Aaron Long, the 21-year-old who's been identified as the killer of all of these persons, that after talking with him, he was having a really bad day. He described the man as someone who was, quote, fed up and at the end of his rope. And therefore, he killed people, that he had a sex addiction. And this was his answer. Wow. And then as people started scrubbing Captain Baker's posts, they found that he had a lot of anti-Asian posts, particularly aimed at the Chinese community. So what do you think about that? Now, he said that his remarks were not intended to disrespect any of the victims, but people said, wait a minute, you excused the killer. So there's a lot going on. We're going to talk with Reverend Jackson about this. Reverend Jesse Jackson, your thoughts about this. Good morning.
Dr. Briscoe? Can you hear me? Yes, Dr. Briscoe. This is Keep Up Alive. All right. Let me put you on listen
because of that. So the atmosphere has been poisoned.
by the highest pulpit in the country.
Let's talk about that, everybody. What do you think and what can be done about it? And this is a global issue, everyone. This is a global issue. We're seeing a sharp uptick in violence against Asian people all over the world. What is going on? So we want you to call us. Call us at 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. We want to know what you think about all of this. Is this a hate crime? What are the determinants for a hate crime? Law enforcement said we have to find out if this is a hate crime. There are a lot of steps that they have to take. Of course, we're going to have a tremendous panel with us talking about this, about whether this is a hate crime and really what's behind this and what can we do about it. Moreover, so call us at 1-866-594-HOPE and reach out to Reverend Jackson on his social media at RevJJackson. He has a Twitter poll question: should this be a hate crime? 60% of you plus have said, yeah, it already is. Others are saying we need to wait and see until the investigation is finished. So call us, 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Back in just a few minutes. Hey, everybody. How you doing? Okay, Reverend?
Yes, yes,
Okay, did you get the notes that I had at the door for you?
yes, yes.
Okay, very good.
The other side of the paper was confusing me, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. All you have to do is flip it up, okay? Just lift it up and you can read it, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that because it confuses me. I just don't know how to reprogram my printer. So, hey, everybody, how you doing? You
Morning.
said, good morning. Is this Grace?
Good morning.
Grace Pie and Grace Ji-Soon Kim?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, Grace Pie is from Asian Americans for Advancing Justice. She's Andy Kang's friend, Reverend. She's out of colleague, excuse me. She's here in Chicago. And of course, Reverend Dr. Grace Ji-Soon Kim, brilliant theologian, scholar, minister. Latest book, she's the editor of Keeping Hope Alive. It's a collection of Reverend Jackson's speeches. We're going to have John Nichols from The Nation on with us, their national correspondent, as well as C.K. Hoffler. She can help us to understand what the determinants are for a hate crime. You were on the air with her the other day, Grace, when we were talking about this, because
A great panel.
yeah, well, you're great. So we're glad that you're with us. Everyone, Reverend, you can say hello to everyone. Reverend?
Good morning, everybody.
Well, that
Good
was
morning.
just-
Is it the four of us, the first hour?
Yes, and then I know
Grace.
Reverend Dr. Grace is going to leave, and so will John Nichols.
So John Nichols is on the first hour?
He is.
Okay.
You know what?
Good morning, John.
He'll be up in
Good
a hot
morning,
second.
Reverend.
Oh,
It's
great.
good to be with you.
Can you get
Good
Good
morning,
evening.
John.
Good morning.
I
It's an honor to be
can't
with
get in here.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you remember me.
How you say?
I don't know. I know you. I don't know if you remember me. But anyway, it's great to be on the show. Oh, great. Thank you.
It's a tremendous honor and an important time to be on.
Yeah.
So many troubling things going on, but also a few good things.
Oh, we've got Chris
Yeah.
Keys.
You know what,
Oh,
John?
where are
I
you,
have
Chris?
a
Are you in the
podcast. I
United
would love to
States?
have you on one day.
Speaking
I don't know how
Hey,
you're going to
Chris.
hold of you.
Well,
this morning
if you've got a piece of paper,
It's South Bend,
J. Nichols.
Hold on one second.
Okay, sure.
Speaking this morning at the South Bend, United Methodist Church.
Reverend, I need you to speak a little louder.
Speaking today at the South Bend,
It's
United Methodist Church in Wheeling, Illinois.
Can you all, I'm sorry, can you all hear Reverend?
so
I'm sorry,
Really
John?
hard to hear. He has to speak slower.
I know,
Hello?
I know that. That having been said, but hold on, can you hear him? Grace, can you hear him?
This morning at the 11 o'clock,
Yeah.
I'll be speaking at
Okay.
It's just a little bit
South
level.
Bend, United Methodist Church.
Okay, Reverend,
Yes?
number one, ask Bruce to turn the volume up on your phone. There's no way you can use a landline, right?
I could.
That would be better, always.
Uh,
No. It's too late to change. We got to stay right here. But just remember, as he's reminded constantly, that we cannot do that on the air, Grace. You need to speak slowly, Reverend, and loudly so that we can hear you, okay?
Okay.
It's loud to you. It's loud in your ear, but it that's taking you to the normal pitch to the rest of us. Okay?
Okay.
So that's so that people, when they hear you, they can hear you. So slow
Okay.
down, please. Hello, Dawn. Hi, Carolyn. Hey, D. Ray. Hey, Chris Keys, Reverend. I don't know. Chris, are you in the country? I think, are you in the United States or are you in South Africa? Let me know. You're in Michigan. Love you, Chris. This is our guy. He heads up our South African initiative. We love Chris. Love you, love you. So stay right here, everybody. Okay, Reverend. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. Let's talk about this rising tide of Asian violence against the Asian American, the AAPI, the Asian American Pacific Islander community. What's going on? And it is not just confined to the United States. It's a global issue, everybody. It's happening in the United Kingdom. It's happening in New Zealand. It's happening in Russia. It's happening everywhere. What is going on? What is going on? Thank you, Marvin Gaye. 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. Let's talk about this today with Grace Pye from Asian Americans for Advancing Justice, the Chicago chapter. We're so glad that she's with us. And Reverend Dr. Grace G. Soon Kim, one of the world's foremost theologians. Her latest book that she edited is Keeping Hope Alive. It's a collection of Reverend Jackson's speeches. We've got John Nichols, the national correspondent for The Nation magazine, the author of The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. And we've got attorney C.K. Hoffler, who is the president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world, more than 66,000 lawyers. She's also the chair of Rainbow Push. And of course, Frank Watkins is hanging out with us, but we're going to go with this first panel so that we can hear what's going on. Grace Pye. Reverend Jackson, what is your reaction when you heard about these killings? What was your first reaction? Was this
A build-up of anti-Asian sentiment in the country. Let me first say, Santita, half the world's population is Asian. Half all human beings are Asian. Half of them are Chinese. 1/8 African, 1/4 Nigerian. America and Russia are together less than 4% of the world's population. And of course, in South America, English is a minority language. So most people in the world are yellow, brown, black, non-Christian, poor, female, young, and don't speak English. We must appreciate the Asian population. And when it came west to east, came as workers. They have built a railroad from California through the mountains of Utah. Been here for a long, and some are always seen as other than, seen as non-citizens. And we have the need to stand with them and they with us. Black Lives Matter march off next time. Asians should be in the front of the line. They really must be seen as part of the struggle to change in America for the better.
Amen to that. Grace Pye, your reaction to this killing and the is it too early to call it a hate crime?
I mean, to me, it's obvious that there were racial and gender motivations in, the shooter targeting the people who he did. For me, my first reaction was just really deep sadness. I think for many of us in the API community, we've seen the rise in hate incidents and just anti-Asian sentiment, especially over the last year. And so, unfortunately, I think many of us were expecting something like this to happen. It wasn't a question of if, but when. But you never want to be right on that. You want to be proven wrong. And so to see something, just the scale of this tragedy, it just really hit me just hard. It hit really close to home for me.
Do you think that, what did you make of Captain Jay Baker, who said that this guy, that Robert Long was just having a really bad day, that he's really been in a bad place? What did you make of that?
I mean, it's just so disturbing to me that, that somebody would attempt to downplay the racist and, misogynistic motivations of this attack. It's also just kind of appalling. Honestly, that was what drove me into a lot of anger in the days following this shooting, I think I started in a place of really deep sadness, but once I heard that and started to hear the other things that were being said to humanize the shooter, it's like, why are we not talking about the victims and their families and the lives that they lived? Like, that should be our focus, on humanizing them and not humanizing this person who took 8 lives, in a span of an hour? I mean, it was just really horrifying to me that was the instinct of, that spokesman for the police, and that this is his job, that his job is to kind of put out public narrative about what's going on in these investigations. And that I think we saw a lot of mainstream media just kind of take his words at face value and just put them out there and really shape some of the early coverage of what happened.
Well, what did you think when we found out that he was promoting the sales of an anti-Asian t-shirt, specifically anti-Chinese? Place your order here while they last. COVID-19 imported virus from China, of course, a play on President Trump's pronunciation of China.
I think it speaks to this broader problem of the infiltration of, white supremacists and white nationalists in our law enforcement, right? Like, this is a systemic problem. We know that this bigotry and racism has permeated institutions like the police. And so, it's like, I think when we see local responses to these hate crimes being, we need to increase, police presence in Asian American communities, I think, we as an organization very much disagree with that, because increased police presence does not necessarily result in more safety, as many other communities of color know. And I think, that's really important for us to kind of name that and to just be aware of how this moment can be used to further, things that are not kind of on our agenda, that we don't think will increase safety and justice for Asian American communities.
Reverend Dr. Grace, yes, Reverend. Yes.
Many of the police are disguised, many white supremacists are disguised, and police are disguised as soldiers. So they take bring their culture to the police department and the military. They're acting it out. We saw it January the 6th, but this is we're in a very, my motto is the men and we're one. We're attacking the science of that notion.
Reverend Dr. Grace G. Soon Kim, what did you make of this attack? Your reaction?
First of all, thank you so much for having this discussion on your Keep Hope Alive radio show. Oh, I was disgusted. I think I think the wider community believe that this is just a recent kind of phenomena, this anti-Asian hate, racism, and the violence. It's only because of social media that we're aware of this. But from the beginning of our migration here, from the 1800s, when majority of the migration started, there has always been violence towards us, anti-hate, discrimination. The first exclusion of any ethnic community was the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. There was segregation of Chinese and Asian Americans early on in the 1800s. That 1882 Exclusion Act was supposed to be in place for 10 years. It kept getting extended till 1943. Asians, particularly Chinese, cannot vote. No Asians can vote till 1943. There was continual discrimination and hatred. One of the largest mass lynchings was in LA. 10% of the Chinese were murdered at that point. That was in the early 1900s. Then we have the Japanese internment, yellow peril. The list goes on and on and on. It's only because of social media and now the tracking of the anti-Asian violence and racism by different universities and communities from the pandemic till now. For 1 year, it's almost 4,000 violent cases. It's only because of the tracking that people think it was a recent phenomena. But if you listen to our stories and read our history, the violence, the killing of Asian Americans have been there from the beginning of our migration. So we have to be aware of this. The indentured workers, so many of the railroad workers died violently. They were put in violent positions to die. And then at the end, the white workers got all the glory that they built the railroad. So we have to stop this violence. When that young man killed, he was a Christian and this whole phenomena is tied in with racism, discrimination, and Christian nationalism, colonialism, fetishizing of Asian women. This needs to stop. We have to name it. We have to not give any excuses for what this man did or any young white man does to people of color when they go after us. We have to stop this, name it, categorize it as a hate crime, because witnesses have said when he went into those spas, he said, kill all Asians. He was angry, and now he's caught. He doesn't know what to do. He's giving all these excuses, and the public has to stop this narrative of what he's saying. We as Asian Americans, we are we're a communal society. We're very collective, and we are in so much pain. When we read the list of the victims, one of them, Miss Grant, that's her married name. She's the same age as me. She left behind 2 sons. She has no other family here in the U.S. These 2 boys are on their own. When we see these victims, we are a collective people. And in Asia, and particularly in Korea, we use the term Han, H-A-N, which is this unjust suffering where we collectively experience the suffering. And I think African Americans have the same feeling too, this collectiveness of this unjust suffering. And this is what we're fearing today. I've talked to so many of my friends and colleagues, professors, ministers. They are shaking physically because of how it's affecting us. These are people, these victims, we have to name them. And I wish we would stop focusing on this young guy who committed the murder and focus on how we can build up as a nation. Stop this Christian nationalism where there's only space for white people, where Christians can only be white. Sometimes Black people are accepted into this, but everyone else, we're excluded and we are evil. Asian Americans have been demonized. They have said we are rats. We need to be killed right from the beginning, from the 1800s. And this narrative needs to stop. We need to stop it now.
It's just, yes, Reverend.
In the 84 campaign, I met Mrs. Vincent Chin.
That's right.
Mother Vincent.
That's right.
Was killed, and of course, all the workers. They say he thought he was Chinese. He was Japanese. He was
Chinese.
He was
They
Chinese.
thought he was Japanese. Yeah.
He thought he was Japanese because they were reacting to Honda, Toyota, and Nissan cars. Many of those they're now working for Honda, Nissan, and Toyota, for example. But they're beating up cars from all sides of the Japanese origin.
Well, that's right. I mean, in
but
fact,
the horror of that story is those murderers got off free. That's the horror of that story.
Well, and you know what? I think Reverend Dr. Grace G. Soon Kim, brilliant minister and theologian, is that we have to begin to have intersectionality. Because when African Americans hear this, when we hear comfort women, when we hear the hypersexualization of women, that's the Black story. I mean, that's a story that's repeated over and over and over in these communities of color. And John Nichols, your reaction to this?
Certainly. It's such an honor to be on with these guests and with Grace and also the Reverend and you. I think we could call this a hate crime. I don't think we should be uncomfortable in doing so. And we have to be intersectional in our sympathy and solidarity. We also have to be intersectional in our analysis. And when you are killing people, human beings, because of what they look like, because of their ethnicity, because of their gender. And when you bring all these things together, of course there's hate there, there's violence. And it is vital that we take this important message about humanizing people who were killed, about understanding them as part of our family, as part of our community. And this does take me back, as Reverend mentioned, to the Vincent Chin case in San Francisco, and the great rally in Portsmouth Square in San Francisco, I believe in 1984, where the Reverend stood in solidarity with, in that case, primarily the Chinese American community. And this is something that I think we have to do at this point. We have to identify this as a hate crime. We have to in solidarity with those who have been harmed. We have to humanize the victims. We have to also humanize the struggle. And what that requires is for all of us to step up and to make this central to our campaigning, central to our politics. This is the great challenge in this moment. I saw it even in the immediate aftermath of the killings in Atlanta. There was not a centering of the victims. There was not a centering of this as a hate crime. There was not an immediate understanding of what had occurred. It required, in this case, the Asian American community, the AAPI community, to step up and say, hey, hold it. This needs to be understood as such. And that can't be that way in the future. We have to understand that the struggle for economic and social and racial justice must include the struggle to stop Asian hate, the struggle to show AAPI solidarity, and to make this central to what we fight for going forward.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler.
Yes, Asian Americans cannot line the cut. It must be a part of the base thrust to humanize America. That's a big issue here, that as Black Lives Matter marches, the Asians should be in that march because they too are victims of the same situation. And I'm concerned now that racism is a mental disorder, and that it is a virus, a pandemic, and there's no vaccine for it because there's privilege that goes with and power goes with the sickness.
Can I just,
sure,
if I can just throw one final element in here too? When I was in Black Lives Matter marches this last summer, AAPI folks, Asian Americans, were there. They did show up.
Yeah.
They were there with their signs. They were there in solidarity. In fact, they were often in the front lines. They were sometimes the first people to show up. And so now it is so very vital that all of us show up. Those of us who are involved in labor struggles, those of us who are involved in anti-racism struggles, those of us who are involved in the fight on COVID-19, because it is so vital to understand that Asian Americans, particularly Asian American women, are often in the front lines as healthcare providers, as service workers, as essential workers in our society. And so this is a time to really open up and understand that we need a true solidarity. And that solidarity at this point must center AAPI Americans and all the folks who've been so targeted and so harmed in this last week.
We want you to call us at 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. Let's talk about this. What about this rising tide of violence, of hatred against our Asian American brothers and sisters, the AAPI community? What is going on? And what is going on all around the world? It's not just confined to the United States. When we get on the other side of the break, joining Grace Pye and Reverend Dr. Grace G. Kim and John Nichols is attorney C.K. Hoffler. She's down in Atlanta where this happened. And she's also the chair of Rainbow Push and the president of the National Bar Association. Indeed, she's one of the world's most esteemed lawyers. She's practiced here and overseas for 30 years. We want to know what the determinants are for a hate crime. We saw so much of, the Ahmaud Arbery case galvanized the Georgia community on hate crimes. But what's going on? I mean, why is this not called a hate crime yet? And law enforcement are saying that we need an investigation. So what must the investigation yield in order for this to be determined to be a hate crime? 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. And everybody over here on Facebook, please like and share. We want to hear from you. And if you are over on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel, please like and subscribe. But like and share on Reverend Jesse Jackson. Keep hope alive. Back in just a minute. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I can hear something in the background. So let's just make sure we keep that. Frank Watkins, how are you?
Terrific.
Great. I'd like for you to talk about Vincent Chin and how that was one of the drivers for the 83 and 84 campaign. That's something you and John Nichols know about. But of course, Attorney C.K. Hoffler's got to explain to us, well, what does it take
Good
to
morning.
call something a hate crime? Now, we're on Facebook Live now, but we'll be back up in another 90 seconds.
Okay.
Reverend Jackson?
Yeah. I have been thinking. Yeah.
No, I was just trying to make sure he was still there, John. Yes, John?
I was just saying, I've been thinking a lot about that Vincent Chin case of late, and that. Do you remember, Reverend, that remarkable rally in Portsmouth Square in San Francisco? Oh yeah, it was such an amazing moment, and to me that was a really, really powerful show of solidarity at a time when, frankly, a lot of Democratic politicians were failing.
Yeah.
There was not, in the mid-'80s there was not enough show of solidarity. And the Jackson campaign was really, to my mind, the Jackson campaign was very revolutionary in that, and very vibrant.
Yeah, I need to add that, the
came out of that campaign doing organization. Yes, Eddie Wong, yeah.
Yeah, well, you got out to California. You got out to California, you found out that much of the energy for the California campaign was coming out of the Asian community. And when we got to San Francisco, in Chinatown, they had a big banner at the entry, at both entries, at both entrance points.
Right.
Welcome Jackson delegates. They didn't do that for any other campaign.
That's right.
And
That's right.
when they saw us walking around, you got discounts. Like, tell Jesse, fight. Tell.
That's right. You know.
Reverend Jackson.
Yes, Grace. We got
Reverend
about
Jackson.
60 seconds.
The Vincent Chin case, this is the ongoing case about Asian Americans as being invisible. People don't categorize our discrimination and racism as racism. So this is an ongoing
Stand by.
struggle,
Hold on. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We're talking about this rising tide of violence against the AAPI community. Thank you, Bob Marley. Let's come together and be all right. One love. That's not what we're feeling right now, but some of us are trying to get there. Joining Grace Pye, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, the Chicago chapter, and Reverend Dr. Grace G. Soon Kim, world-renowned theologian, scholar, the editor of the book, Keeping Hope Alive, a collection of Reverend Jackson's speeches. John Nichols, the nation's national correspondent. Of course, his latest book is The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. And Reverend Frank Watkins, Reverend Jackson's 50-year communications director. And, joining us right now is Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Reverend Jackson, the chair of your board of Rainbow Push, the president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world. She's down in Atlanta. What do you see? What is a hate crime? What do you make of Captain Baker and telling us that Robert Long just had a bad day?
Good morning, Santita. Good morning, Reverend. Good morning, Grace. Good morning, Grace. Good morning, John. Good morning to your audience. This is a shameful day, another shameful day in the history of the United States, where you have law enforcement, the spokesperson for that county that is commenting on one of the more heinous crimes that we've seen, certainly in the Atlanta metropolitan area, saying that the perpetrator is having a bad day. He should be removed. He should be fired. He should be terminated. He should not have benefits. But he is a reflection of the mindset, unfortunately, of many in that county, and unfortunately many in the Atlanta metropolitan area. There is no question, based on the elements of a hate crime, a federal hate crime, that this would be considered a hate crime. It was a criminal action, yes, murder, that was committed, and the evidence that we know now, and there hasn't even been a real investigation hasn't even begun, but based on the evidence that's in the public domain, we know that it was motivated by a hatred or by animus against Asian Americans. We know this. We know we have evidence of what was said by the perpetrator, and we don't need to call his name. We do need to call the names of the victims. This should not be about the perpetrator who's a criminal who's committed these heinous acts. It should be about the victims. And I do agree with Grace when she said that the media, the national media, has chosen to characterize this in such a way so that in the court of public opinion, there is, in some sectors, sympathy for this deranged person who was fully cognizant of what he was doing. He was deranged, but he knew what he was doing. And for him to say, well, and for the law enforcement to say he was having a bad day, that just goes in furtherance of setting up a defense that maybe somehow he snapped, he had a moment of insanity. No. There's no insanity. He was clear. He knew what he was doing. He committed a crime. It was targeted at a group of people, and he succeeded and would have continued but for his mother turning him in. That is a hate crime. The elements would be met under federal law. And up until the killing of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, there was no hate crime statute. But guess what? There is now. And this will likely be the first test case in Georgia. And I'm certain that it's going to be, these crimes will be prosecuted because it wasn't just one crime. These are multiple crimes committed against 3 establishments, leading to the death of 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian American. I agree, this has got to stop. It has got to stop. As we all marched in solidarity when we saw the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, something very common in the African American community, so too is this common in the Asian American community. And just so that you all know, the National Bar Association has stood in solidarity with NAPABA and other Asian American bar associations immediately denounced and condemned this, and we've dedicated our resources in solidarity. We have a conference coming up where we're going to be addressing this issue, among other issues, because it's got to stop. And the lawyers in this country have the ability to make a difference, just as we made a difference with George Floyd, and I'm proud to say our National Bar members led that effort. So too can we make a difference in these cases. But it's only done when there's solidarity. It's only done when we stand together. It's only done when we protest together. It's only done when we march together, just as Reverend Jackson has taught us over the decades to do. We must now go to action. Lawyers, grassroots organizations, and the community.
Carmelita Rivera. Yes, Reverend.
I'm speaking at an Asian American church today in Wheeling, Illinois. The United Methodist Church, led by Asian American Church, because we're showing our solidarity, showing our relationship, because it matters so much to me. It's part of the Rainbow Coalition.
Well, let's go to Frank Watkins, because Reverend Frank Watkins, of course, you were one of the architects of Reverend's campaigns, and the rainbow has, I think people were surprised in 1983 to see the extent to which the Asian American community embraced that campaign. Can you speak to that?
Well, yeah, that was an important issue then. As you pointed out, people thought that it was an what was it, Asian, what did they think it was? They thought it was Japanese. No, they thought it was.
They thought that Vincent Chin was
Japanese,
Japanese, but he was Chinese.
Japanese because there had been so much
because of the
against Japanese automakers.
Right.
Yeah, make them.
It turned out to be Chinese.
He was beaten at the Chrysler plant. I remember that.
Right. Well, it's interesting to me, as I was listening to everything, to me, today we're calling it intersectionality. But in 1984 and 1988, we simply called it the Rainbow Coalition. Democratic Party was not mentioned. The Democratic Party was not open to certain groups, including Asian Americans, but it was also true of African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, Arab Americans. I remember Mondale returned a check, I believe, a contribution from an Arab American in Philadelphia, if I remember correctly. They weren't open to HIV/AIDS people or disabled. Clinton in 1984, said he was a new Democrat. And then he conducted what they called a counter scheduling strategy to say that he wasn't beholden to special interests. That was the context of the Sister Soldier incident. And then he left the Rainbow Coalition dinner and went before Ask Me and distanced himself from labor. And then when women complained that there weren't enough women in his administration, he called them bean counters. So, there's this whole history of denial of intersectionality and denial of Rainbow Coalition. The Atlanta officer who said that the killer had a bad day had been guilty himself of posting anti-Asian posters or something. So this was maybe it had all three dimensions. He may have had a sexual addiction, but it was also apparently that he also was connected to a sexual fetish. He had visited these, places before. And it was a racial incident, a hate crime representing xenophobia. But it was also a gender crime, misogynist. I mean, it encompassed all three of those dimensions of life. So that's sort of my take. And what it really represented, it reminded us of our history of violence and white supremacy. I think Grace mentioned the Exclusionary Act in the 1800s.
Chinese Exclusion Act, 1882.
But it was also the Japanese internment camps during World War II. So there was both, racism, sexism involved in this.
To add to the sexism, can I just say, when the Asian American, at the beginning of the migration, only the men were allowed to come in, and then slowly just a small percentage of Asian women were allowed to come in, and the only jobs that most of these women were given were the sex workers. Mm-hmm. So they were already fetishized. They were already kind of placed in this hole. And this hypersexualization of Asian American women continues today, even in the social media, even in our movies, even in our literature. So this needs to stop. So thank you for mentioning that.
Sure, but Grace Pie.
Yes. On Santita,
yes,
if I could add about the sex addiction,
sure.
This is CK. Because I do not want us to lose sight of what they are trying to do.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people, there are millions of people who are sex addicts. They don't go out and kill 8 people. Mm-hmm. There are millions of people every minute, every second that have a bad day. They don't go out and kill 8 people. They are creating a legal defense. They are trying to create a legal defense. So we must not fall into that trap. He knew what he was doing. He thought about it. He contemplated. He had the mens rea, as we say in the legal community and legal jargon. He had the intent. He had formulated that intent. He knew where he was going. He had planned on continuing to kill Asian Americans, and he accomplished that. And but for his mother turning him in, he would have continued that spree. That was what was in his mind.
Hate crime.
These are hate crimes. And what I'm pointing to are the elements of a hate crime. In his mind, he had the mens rea. He committed the crime. It was designated to be against a specific group based on race and based on national origin. Those are the elements of a hate crime. So let's move away this sex addiction stuff. He's just trying to create a defense that somehow he wasn't in his right mind. We do not need to fall into that trap. That is a legal trap, in my opinion.
Well,
I just wanted to.
Well, no, of course. Yes, John Nichols.
Just want to jump in on top of that and say, what CK is doing is really vital here, because she's talking about the legal struggle, right? The legal fight. We should also understand there is the media struggle. There is the struggle in popular communication. And the fact of the matter is that I think the caution of our media, and frankly the caution of many of our political leaders, to refer to this as a hate crime, separate and apart from the legal struggle, there is hate on display here. There is violence on display here. There are people who have been targeted. In our popular language, we use the term hate crime, understanding its legal component, but also understanding its broader message that when hate is directed, when violence is directed at people because of where their ancestors or where they have come from, because of their gender, when that occurs in our society, we call it out. We stand up and rally and march and say this cannot be. We make it a political issue. We make it a legislative issue. And yes, we do take it to the courts. But this is what I think we have to recognize here is
John,
this moment.
Can I just add that?
Hold on one moment. Reverend Jackson, and then you, Grace. Reverend?
Behind the wall, whether it's mental wall or physical, is ignorance.
That's right.
Fear, hatred, and violence. That's the root. Ignorance, fear, hatred, and violence. The ignorance about Asian American contribution, fear of their growth, hatred, and violence is a rhythm, and we should call hatred.
Grace, I've got about a minute before we go back.
Yeah, so I just recently wrote a piece for the Christian Century called "The Atlanta Shootings Have Awakened a Ferocious Anger and Grief Among Asian Americans." When I was submitting this, the editors wanted me to take out hate crime. They said it's not proven. And I said, I'm not going to publish this unless you put that in. So we argued a bit about it, but they eventually added it in. But this is what John Nichols was talking about. The narrative has already been said in the media because of that police officer saying he had a bad day. We have to change the narrative. The legal thing is another matter, but the social media and what people and what the white community are saying is, oh, he had a bad day, and they continue that narrative. We have to label it as what John Nichols has said. It is a hate crime, and we have to change the narrative because of this long history of Asian Americans being invisible. And my new book that's coming out this year is called Invisible, because the white supremacy has suppressed the discrimination that has happened, the racism that has happened, the hate that has happened to our community from the beginning of our migration. So this narrative, please help us change it. And thank you for the solidarity from the Black community, the white community, the Hispanic, the Native American community, because this intersectionality and what white supremacy has done to us with the model minority myth, which pits us, people of color, against one another. And I know from this shooting, people are all upset. People of color, we don't know how to react. But we need to be in solidarity with one another. When white supremacy hurts one group of people of color, it hurts all of us. So when Black Lives Matter, when they were marching, we Asian Americans, thank you, John Nichols, for pointing out, we were there in solidarity. We need to be in solidarity with one another today. And I thank you that you're covering this today on Keep Hope Alive radio show, because we need each other to fight against what Reverend Jackson has said, the virus of racism. It is penetrating. We need to get rid of it. We need to kill it, because more of this is happening. Sure. And I'm just afraid that more people are going to die.
Well, I think that absolutely, what we have to do first is know and acknowledge each other's stories. Because when Black women hear what Asian American women are going through, the AAPI women this is our story, and it's a 500-year trek that we've had here. Comfort women, Black women understand that, because that's what we've always been. Rosa Parks was well known in the state of Alabama before she refused to get moved to the back of the bus, because she investigated the rapes of Black women, which were never prosecuted, the rapes of Black women by white men. And she was most famous for investigating a documentary about Reese Taylor, a Black woman who was gang raped by 6 or 7 white men, and no one would prosecute them, and everybody knew. This happens to all of us. This is our story. This is our song. Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Let's talk about it, everybody. 1-866-594-HOPE, 1-866-594-4673. Let's talk about this rising tide of Asian American violence. The AAPI community. We're all one, everybody. One love. Back in just a few minutes.
Get together and feel all right.
Grace,
John,
you said that.
Yes.
John and Grace, I know you all going to have to
no
leave.
Asian-
I'm sorry.
I'm only staying for the first hour. Yes.
Yes, yes. Thank you, thank you for those
no
powerful
Asians
words.
could vote before 1943. What law was passed?
Say that one more time. I couldn't hear you.
You said no Asians could vote before
Yes.
1943. What law was passed?
I can't remember what the law. My AirPods just dropped. I don't know what the name of the law is. I can find out. But not all Asian Americans were allowed to vote in 1943. I think it was the Chinese first, Japanese in 1946, and it continued on. So small increments of Asian Americans were allowed to vote, but we couldn't vote because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which said we couldn't buy property, we couldn't be citizens, we had to carry papers around. There was a lot of segregation, and that's why when those other pandemics happened, the flus and so forth, the Chinese Americans were actually hoisted together, and then they were also segregated. They were put in these little places. So families were separated during those times. And so these stories are kind of pushed aside. My kids who grew up here, 3 kids, they never learned anything about Asian American history because it's not taught in our education system.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrific. So this invisibility of Asian American stories needs to stop. We need to share our stories. It needs to be acknowledged in primary and secondary education. People need to know that this segregation,
Reverend, slow down, Reverend.
Did any of you ever get the Asian flu?
Well, you know, Reverend, you always you said in 1983 that everybody had a point and everybody had a patch, but your patch is not big enough. You gotta you gotta sew all of these patches together. And I think that when we do that, we make progress. We make
Because
progress.
we're the majority, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay.
On that note,
Yes.
Frank,
Okay.
the repeal of the Chinese
Okay.
Exclusion Act in 1943. So that was finally repealed in 1943, and that's what allowed us first the Chinese to vote, and then the Indians, and then the Japanese. But it didn't happen all at once either.
And Grace, it's important to point out that you're right about the 43 repeal, but it wasn't until 52, until
There you go.
1952,
Yeah.
that Congress actually overturned some of the barriers to voting. And so we actually, that's so glad you pointed this out.
Yeah.
And people don't know that. We're thinking about voting rights, we always think about just African Americans, but we had a hard time to vote.
Yeah, but you know, but that's why.
Well, this is.
I'm sorry,
I want to
Grace.
briefly chime in. This
Yes.
is Grace Pye, and you know, my great grandfather became a citizen in 1952 because he had to wait up until that point. And that's when he was able to also sponsor relatives for immigration. But
How much time?
I think the thing that I want to bring up is just that my organization, Advancing Justice Chicago, is leading a campaign to mandate that Asian American history is taught in K through 12. And I think maybe when we come back in the break, I would love to share that. Because I think from what we've learned so far, there is no
Stand by.
other state in the country that has
What?
a similar
You'll have
mandate.
a little bit over.
And Frank, all this is
Reverend, hold on, everybody, hold on. Because literally, I'm going to have you and John, Grace G. Sun Kim, and John Nichols will have 1 minute inside of a minute. When you hear my voice, that means I got to go, okay? Because I have a hard out with my affiliates.
Got it.
And Grace Pye, you'll be staying on with us. Grace Pye, when we get on the other side, I want us to delve more deeply into the hypersexualization of Asian women, AAPI women, and Black women and brown women. It's something we can all relate to because, we've got magical sexual powers if you listen to everybody.
Sure.
What?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Good saying.
All of us. Stand by. Reverend, I'm going to go right to these. Hey, everybody. Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. Reverend Jackson, of course, joins us on the phone. Let us get some closing thoughts from John Nichols of The Nation magazine. Get his new book, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party.
The other night here in Madison, Wisconsin, I was honored to join members of our AAPI community as well as the broader community in a real rainbow coalition show of solidarity, a huge march and rally. And it was a wonderful night, led in many ways by State Rep Francesca Hong, the first Asian American, Korean American elected official in the state of Wisconsin in our state legislature. But as wonderful as that was, it can't be just one night. It has to be constant. And we have to kind of break that barrier and make sure that AAPI solidarity, that our solidarity with a community that is currently hurting, but that has been so long neglected, now becomes central to our broader message of economic and social and racial justice. This is the realization of the rainbow promise.
Amen to that. Reverend Dr. Grace G. Soon Kim.
Yeah, I just want to remind that this hate crime has been part of our immigrant history and our immigrant story, so we need to stop it. We can't blame victims. It's like the rape victim. We can't blame the rape victim. We have to name it for what it is. We have to penalize these people, and we have to stop the hate, because if it continues, more of us are going to die. 8 people died this past week, but in the past year, so many Asian Americans have been killed because of hate. So we have to stop it. I think part of this root is the racism, which is based on white supremacy. You know, as Christians and as a Christian theologian, we have to stop this preaching of a white God and white Christianity and white Jesus, because God is not white. Jesus was not white, and Christianity is not white. So we have to kind of root out this Christian nationalism that uplifts Christians as white people, and only whites can really be Christians. When I teach theology, everybody says I'm an Asian American theologian. I can never be categorized as a theologian. Only the white men are the theologians. I'm an Asian American woman theologian. So we have to recognize that Christianity, God created all of us in God's image, which includes blacks and Asians, Hispanic, Native Americans. We are all Christians. So we have to stop this white nationalism, white Christian nationalism, because this causes so much of the hate crime.
But let me get Reverend. I'm sorry, Grace. I'm going to give Reverend the last 30 seconds here before we go into the second hour. Reverend Jackson.
We stand with Asians today, yesterday, and tomorrow. Today I'll be at the United Methodist Church in Wheeling, Illinois.
Yes.
In the pulpit with Asian Americans, we stand, we worship together, we fight together. We're going to grow together. We'll prosper together. Love you guys very much. Love you.
Stay right here, everybody. Stay right here for the second hour of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. 1-866-594-HOPE. 1-866-594-4673. John Nichols and Reverend Dr. Grace G. Soon Kim. Our love to you. Thank you for being with us today. Grace Pye, thank you for staying with us. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, thank you for staying with us. And thank you for staying with us, Reverend Frank Watkins. Let's talk about this. The violence against the Asian community the world over. What can we do to stop it? We can do something. We can work it out. Back in just a minute.
Thank you for listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit our website at www.keephopealiveradio.com.
Intersectional panel, intersectional radio show too, because that's so important, Santita. So thank you so much for covering it. I hope you continue.
We've been doing that actually, because we had that on Friday so that Grace Pye they could understand that we're all together in that. I mean, that's just because that's the rainbow. That's all I know.
Right.
And so I have actually
Grace Pye, Reverend, is Grace Pye, Ms. Pye.
Yeah, Ms. Pye.
Yeah.
that Rainbow Push noontime Monday. If possible.
I'll have to get back to you on that. Let me check.
If you can,
My
please.
schedule.
Let me see. Reverend, let's take care of that when we get off the air, please.
Yeah, we'll take it right now.
And I got
Whoa, oh, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't what they
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We've been talking about this rising tide of violence against the AAPI community, the Asian American Pacific Islander community. What happened in Atlanta? Why is there pushback by the law enforcement community on calling this a hate crime? Why? The spokesman for the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office, Captain Baker, he said that Robert Long, 21-year-old, who's been identified as the murderer, that he was having a bad day. He was going through a really tough time, and so he killed people. He had a sex addiction, and he had a really bad day. He was fed up. He was at the end of his rope. These are his words now. And so he killed 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian American women. What about the hypersexualization of Asian American women, of AAPI women, which mirrors the hypersexualization of Black women, of Indigenous women, of all women of color, of Latinx women, just everybody? Magical sexual powers that women of color are supposed to have. Wow. And of course, that increases the violence against these women. So we've got a lot to talk about today, a lot to talk about. And we've been hearing from attorney C.K. Hoffler, president of the National Bar Association, how much of what we're seeing in the media is a legal strategy, But before John Nichols goes, Reverend Jackson, he wanted to, as he's been expressing solidarity on this particular issue, because of course he comes out of your 83, 84 campaigns. Part of what drove the campaign was really fighting for a Chinese American gentleman who'd been mistaken for a Japanese American, Vincent Chen. That helped to drive the campaign. John Nichols, you said that even in this dark moment, there's some light in Wisconsin.
Well, I'll be very quick because I want to just add this to the discussion. And one of the great things about the rainbow was its recognition that we brought everyone together, right? African Americans, Latinx, AAPI, and also we brought together workers across all sorts of barriers and across all sorts of lines and supported labor struggles. In Wisconsin last night, after months of struggle, 850 nurses, frontline essential workers in the struggle against the coronavirus pandemic, multiracial, multi-ethnic, who had struggled for respect at Meriter Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin, where they were often required to use up their sick leave and also use up their vacation time when they had to quarantine because of the virus, etc. They put forward a set of demands. It was one of the first great struggles for respect for frontline workers in this COVID crisis, and they won. Last night, they won a tentative agreement in their contract negotiations. They're going to get increased pay, better benefits, more flexible scheduling, and most importantly, they're getting back their vacation time, their earned time that they had to give up during that struggle so that they can renew themselves, renew their families, and kind of get back to a sense of normalcy here. It was a huge labor victory. And in these dark and difficult times, it is important for us to recognize that solidarity, multiracial, multi-ethnic, pro-worker solidarity can and does succeed.
Thank you so much for that. Because, of course, when in these economic downturns, we see this kind of violence targeting people of color. It's unbelievable.
And if I can just close off with one final thought, as we are talking about solidarity with the AAPI community, with Asian Americans, let us be very, very clear that many of the nurses who have been on the front lines, many of the workers in so many other settings have been Asian American women. They have been in the front lines of keeping us alive and keeping us strong through this struggle. And so at this moment, as we show solidarity, let us celebrate victories, as we must for what has happened in Wisconsin, but let us also recognize the pain and the struggle that people are going through and say that from here on out, we have a true intersectional rainbow solidarity that lifts up working class people of all races, of all ethnicities, and says, no more discrimination. Now it's about empowerment.
We are one. Reverend Jackson, before we go to break.
Is Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, too?
Unfortunately, but Reverend, don't bring him up. It just makes it that's a sad and difficult part of our discussion. Let's only speak about when labor is on the march and when labor is winning, we can put Ron Johnson aside.
Oh my gosh. Oh no. We'll be back.
Reverend.
Reverend Jackson. Well, now
I love you, Reverend. I love you more.
You gotta love him, but California gave us Reagan too, Harris. So what can we do? That's what happens.
Neil gave us Trump.
And they give. Wait a minute, Maxine Waters and Willie Brown. Come on now.
But let us stand in solidarity with those who are on the right side of history, not as Ron Johnson is on the wrong side of history.
Thank you, John Nichols. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson in just a few minutes.
All things ain't what they used to be.
I do have to go, but thank you, Reverend.
Thank you, John Nichols. Oh, awful.
I appreciate it,
John. I have an idea, a story idea that I want to run up the tree, and I don't mind saying this on the air here. There's been one African American woman who owned a Major League Baseball team, and she owned it in the 80s. This is Tracy Lewis, Reverend Tom Lewis's daughter, and there was
Savannah. Savannah, Georgia.
That's well, you would know this because it was the farm team for the St. Louis Cardinals. And I think that it's an idea, and they were pushed out of baseball. She graduated from Williams College, really extremely bright. Her father was a banker, and just like Jerry Buss gave his daughter the Lakers, her father bought this team for her. And we need to push that story because I think that there should be space for her in baseball, and certainly people need to know that a black woman did own a Major League Baseball team.
I love that story. Let's talk about that. Baseball.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a farm team, but it was Major League. Look, she was on the Today Show, People Magazine. All these people did stories about her because that was a major feat, and we've not seen it since.
Yeah,
I went to a Savannah game. I had in a car. Somebody hit a foul ball, went right through the back window.
Oh,
of course that's the case.
Poor Frank.
Frank,
with the Grapefruit League.
That story yet.
Oh, I mean, Frank's not going to tell you how he used to beat up people when they were playing basketball.
All right, I have to take off. I'm so apologetic. I love this conversation, and I love the importance of this show and highlighting these issues. This is really vital. I'm sorry I have to go.
No. Thank you. But this is Reverend Show, so this was he really wanted to do this today. And Grace Pye, thank you, love you, John. Grace Pye, I'm gonna connect you and Reverend later on, okay? And if we could bring Andy Kang into this as well, because there's stuff that we've got to do. Reverend was very excited when I told him that I was going to have you on the show, particularly since you're here in Chicago, which means we don't have to Zoom necessarily. We can actually see you. So that's great.
Thanks, Grace, for all the work you're doing. I'm super excited about it, and I want to keep focused on that, especially on the voting rights parts of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Definitely.
Okay, and John, I just connected you and Grace Ji-Soon Kim by text.
We'll talk.
And then Grace, also just in terms of the lawyers, I've got 65,000 of them. So, just in terms of lawyers, I know we're coordinating with other AAPI bar associations, but if you just needed to Councilman Santita has all can connect us as well. But just know we stand in solidarity.
I'll do that. I'll connect the two of you right now because I mean, because
Grace,
that needs to happen.
Grace, let me tell you something. When CK offers 55,000 lawyers, she's serious. It's real. It's a lot of power at your back.
That's
All right,
right.
I'm going to say love and solidarity to everybody. Be
Sending
strong.
you much love, John.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm connecting the two of you now. Grace Pie. Okay. Reverend?
Yes,
Dad, you sound great today.
thank you, baby.
Okay, you sound great. Okay, you sound
I'm
great.
going to Willis Street this morning to the Asian allies.
Okay, if you just take your time, because you sound great. You sound great.
Trying to get that, baby.
You know, you just got to keep working at it. I know it's a challenge, but you're up for it. You sound better than you have in years.
I saw some pictures of you out at Concordia. It looked like you had lost a lot of weight, too. That's good.
That's right, he has. He's lost
Really?
a lot. Yeah, Dad, you look good.
Yeah. I was getting ready to challenge you to get back out on the court with me.
You know, now he doesn't have to get harassed by his wife about his girth. Oh, bless his heart. Okay, so here we go. We're coming up, everybody. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. I hope you'll join me on my show, The Santita Jackson Show, on the nation's largest progressive talk radio station at AM 950 Radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We talk about issues like these every day. In fact, Grace Pie was my guest on Friday. We had quite a moving discussion. Grace Pie, Asian Americans Advancing Justice. She's from the Chicago chapter. And then attorney C.K. Hoffler, the president of the National Bar Association, more than 65,000 Black lawyers. It's the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world. She's also the chair of Rainbow Push. And we've got Reverend Frank Watkins, Reverend Jackson's communications director for more than 50 years. He's the co-author of the book with Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., A More Perfect Union, Advancing New American Rights. It's the 20th anniversary edition is coming out this year. Can't wait to have them both on to talk about this. And then, of course, Attorney Robert Patillo. And Attorney Robert Patillo, civil rights lawyer, brilliant, who is also the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push in Atlanta. That's where he is based. He hosts his own show on WAOK every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Attorney C.K. Hoffler hosts her own show on WAOK every Tuesday. If you have legal issues, I don't care what they are, you need to call in at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Look, it's a free consultation, everybody. You don't want to do that. She costs a lot of money per hour, and we love CK. And she does a lot of stuff gratis for civil rights, but she's costly because she's the best. Let me start with you, Reverend Jackson. Your thoughts?
Was saddened by the killing of 8 people, 6 Korean women. Targeted. It was a hate crime and a hateful act. We shouldn't jive around with that. And it's irony that the sheriff who was in Cherokee County, Cherokee were killed there, genocide against Native Americans. Cherokee County. He comes up, but he can't. The guy has a bad day at the job. That itself is racist. But together we fight together. We come together, we win. You know, when you think about it, as half all America, half all people in the world are Asian, half of them are Chinese. As they make countries, there's no big country in Africa than Asian. The African Union is built in Ethiopia, built by the Chinese. The Gila Railroad connecting South to Southwest Africa is built by the Chinese. And so we're business partners, and more people are going to Beijing, not just to Washington, because we the attacks on Benson Chin killed the boy because they say he thought he was Japanese, he was Chinese. Honda, Toyota, Nissan, those companies now are making more cars in America than American companies are making in America.
Well,
in Mississippi, is a big Toyota plant. Because white South Mississippians are working on the Toyota plant now. So we've been rising some of this man.
Wait a minute, what did you say, Reverend?
We grew out of some of this mess, but we must fight together.
Absolutely.
We're out of it.
Grace Pie, your thoughts about this case, the pushback by the law enforcement community about calling it a hate crime, your thoughts, and just, really the hypersexualization of these women. And it was very clear from the owner uh, who was killed. She said, "We don't do that in this shop. We don't do this." And there was a married couple in there, having a spa day. It was these were spas. Grace Pie.
Right. Right. That's what makes it honestly so hard hitting for me is that many Asian Americans, we know these businesses, we go to these businesses, our family members own these businesses, right? Like these are hardworking, in many cases, immigrant women who are trying to provide for their families. And I think, we have to recognize the particularly vulnerable situation that they were in as women, as Asian American women, right? As essential workers during a global pandemic. I mean, I think that there are many layers of vulnerability here and many reasons that this killer targeted them, right? The fact that we have not yet had, kind of public consensus around the fact that this is a hate crime is just absurd to me. He went to one Asian-owned business, killed a bunch of people, and then went to a second and a third. How does that not prove that he was targeting these particular businesses and these particular identities, which were Asian American women, right? I think that's important to name both the racist element, but also the misogynistic element. And the fact that, these kind of police spokespeople and representatives are saying, downplaying his motives, I mean, that's just quite disturbing to me, I think, because, it's very clear that he knew what he was doing. And he targeted women, and he's using this kind of excuse around the sexual addiction, which just plays into this history of sexualization of Asian women.
And the two shops were not in the same mall. I mean, he had to drive
exactly.
A to B to C.
Exactly. Right. He had to drive a long ways to get from one to the other. I mean, it's just the level of just intent. He bought the gun that day, from what I've heard. It just is ridiculous to me that, we're still having a conversation about why did he do this? It's clear as day, I think, from the facts that we have so far. And so, I'm just really deeply saddened that Asian American women are in this position of being targeted by this sexualization. We talked earlier in the show about this history of targeting of anti-Asian violence. In 1875, even, 7 years before the Chinese Exclusion Act, there was a law called the Page Act, which prohibited Chinese women specifically from coming to the United States. And the reasoning behind this ban on Chinese women was this idea that they were immoral and dishonest and undesirable and that they carried disease. A lot of the same kind of themes that we're seeing now, albeit in a different context, and that, that they would essentially kind of introduce these, this lack of morals into white society. I mean, this is the foundation, right? This is the very beginning. 1875, we saw a law targeting Asian women in this way. And we've seen similar narratives of sexualization, this idea that Asian women can only be, dragon ladies or sex workers and that they're exotic. Like we've seen that persisting through media coverage when you think about, how do you see Asian women portrayed in the movies? I mean, it's just been, a really harmful history.
Attorney CK, yes, Reverend?
When I saw blacks marching in great numbers in Atlanta, I felt so proud.
Why, Reverend?
Because we need each other in coalition. As I said, you're building a quilt. Our patch is not big enough, but when together we have the power to cover ourselves, cover people as well, Sandy.
CK Hoffler, you said something in the last in the last hour, and of course you can hear her show on WAOK, the iconic Black Talk radio station, every Tuesday down in Atlanta. But go to WAOK all over the country, all over the world. WAOK at 11 o'clock every Tuesday Eastern Standard Time. You said that this is a legal strategy. I wasn't thinking of it that way, Attorney Hoffler.
Well, certainly there's just no question in my mind, based on the evidence that I've seen, that this is a hate crime. We know it was a hate crime. There's an expression that we use when we break it down. If it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, acts like a duck, and does everything like a duck, it's a duck. This is a hate crime. And that, of course, is not a legal analysis. But if we go to the legal analysis, these crimes are hate crimes. They meet the elements of hate crimes under federal law and under Georgia law, which, by the way, is a new law that came into existence because of the killing of Ahmaud Arbery last year. I just want everyone to know this is new. Prior to the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, there was no hate crime law in Georgia. So whether you look at it under federal law or whether you look at it under state law, in my impression, it would, based on the evidence that I know now, it would meet the elements. This notion that he was having a bad day, that he is a sex addict, is to me a legal strategy and the beginnings of a defense. That somehow he wasn't in his right mind from a mental or sanity standpoint when he did this. I beg to differ. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was in this is his perspective. He does not like, he hates Asian Americans. He wanted to get rid of as many as he could, and that's what he set out to do. And by the way, he did that until his mother turned him in. That's the evidence. Those are the facts. So all this other stuff about having a bad day, millions of people have bad days. They don't kill 8 people. Millions of people are sex addicts. They don't go and kill 8 people.
Wait, but CK.
These are hate crimes.
CK,
hate
Captain
crimes.
Baker understood it. That's why I don't.
Well,
that's why I don't believe in putting his name off to the side. No, we should absolutely know who the victims are. No question about that. But we need to know who he is and understand where he came from. What community built this so that he was understood by law enforcement officers? They said he was having a bad
understood.
day. I don't get
right.
it.
And see, that's the worst part about it. But what does that tell you? That tells you that hatred, insensitivity, racial insensitivity is so alive and well. We only needed to look at what happened on January 6th of 2021, 3 months ago, not even 3 months ago. We know it's alive and well. Cherokee County is not far from Atlanta. It's considered theoretically the Atlanta metropolitan area, but yet so close to Atlanta, where you have more progressive thinking. You have people who would sympathize with someone who has just killed 8 people, 6 of them Asian American women, and probably thought, oh, this poor young man, he was having a bad day. So we have to recognize where we are. We have to recognize from a legal strategy standpoint where the jurors could potentially be coming from. We have to look at all of those factors. At least that's what I look at. And I think that we need to be very cautious about buying into this narrative that it was his sex addiction and him having a bad day that led him to do this. No, he had it in his mind. He set out to do this. He had the intent to kill, and he killed. And that's how we have to look. And it was based on national origin, race, and so we have got to call it a hate crime. When we speak of this case, we have to say hate and we have to say crime, because we know it was a crime. It's a crime in this country to murder someone. It's a crime in this country to do it based on race, national origin, gender, and there are 2 or 3 different classes that we can point to that would support the notion and the theory and the reality that this was a hate crime. Now, I know cases have to be proved. Now, people are saying allegedly this and allegedly that. That's legal jargon because people have to say that when there's been a crime committed and no one's been convicted. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is, based on my assessment right now, based on the evidence that we know that's in the public domain, without a full-fledged investigation and a report to support it, this is a hate crime under federal law and under Georgia law.
Attorney Robert Patillo, your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. We were at the rally yesterday in Atlanta. We've been working closely with some of our Asian leadership, particularly in DeKalb County and Gwinnett County. And this is not new. This is the most extreme version of it, but it's nothing new. And to CK's point, you do not have a bad day and then premeditate to get your stimulus check, and then premeditate to go buy a gun that day, and then premeditate to drive from one location to another, and then target. I hate the fact that the media ran with this massage spa narrative so quickly, because what the public heard was that he was killing prostitutes. And America does not care when people are killing prostitutes. We've made that very clear as Americans, because we don't believe that sex workers are actually workers. But then it comes out a couple of days later that some of the women that he shot were 60 and 70-year-old grandmothers who actually were simply doing massages. They were doing family massages. But this is the way that the media works. They work to demonize the minority first. They work to equivocate on their rights to their personhood. They start talking about bad days and making excuses for the murderer. We saw the same thing with with Charleston, South Carolina. We see the same thing with many of these school shootings. They, before they can even get started, they start calling them a kid. You never hear somebody talk about a black person who killed somebody as a kid. They can be 14 years old. They can say the assailant, the murderer, so on and so forth. They start saying, well, this kid was having a bad day. And just as CK said, what they're trying to set up is an insanity defense, or that he was not in his right mind, to reduce culpability. They are already setting the stage for him not to get the death penalty in a death penalty state like Georgia. And let's not be blinded to this. We saw this with we've seen this many times with African Americans who are convicted of who committed far lesser crimes, and they demonize them from the beginning, from the opening press conference, so that by the time you get to the jury, you have a poisoned jury pool who will only be able to give this person the death penalty. So we have to fight this from both a legal strategy and also from a public relations strategy, because folks need to understand the humanity of these people who were killed and the monstrous nature of this person who committed the murders in cold blood with premeditation.
And because they go into the neighborhood, they pathologize the black killer and his family or her family and the whole community. And you hear their name over and over again, Robert Patillo, and people want to create a protected space for Robert Long. And I said, no, don't protect him. I don't want him hurt, but I want to know, where does he come from, Robert? I mean, I appreciate the fact that his family turned him in, but I want to know, how is it that Captain Baker said no, there's sympathy for him. And I think a community that has sympathy for someone who goes and murders people in cold blood, you've got to ask them, who are you? And you need to ask yourself who you are. Robert Patillo, 2 minutes before we go to break. Robert? Okay, Robert, you're there?
Yeah, I'm here, and just as Reverend said, part of the issue is people saw Georgia turning blue, quote unquote, not understanding that is centralized to the urban areas. That is Atlanta, DeKalb, that is Muskogee, Macon, Augusta, Columbus. Once you get to these outlying counties, you're going right back into Mississippi burnings. So when you go to Cherokee County, in large part, you're dealing with communities of people who wear camo 24 hours a day and drive pickup trucks all day, and who are not enlightened on many of these social changes and social movements that are happening in America, or frankly afraid of it. They're fed by a right-wing media stream that tells them they are losing their country. Listen to the Republican National Convention, where they said we are fighting to defend Western civilization. They've been told that they've been locked in the house for a year because of a virus sent by China. That is the words of the former president of the United States, who referred to still refers to coronavirus as China virus. When you continue to demonize people, when you continue to dehumanize people, when you continue on a national stage to say that these people are your enemy, and it's not as if your average person is out here making distinctions between Chinese, Japanese, Korean, so on and so forth. They just see in complete demonization of an entire category of human beings. And you combine this with the way that we treat sex workers in this country, the way that we treat women in this country, the way we treat older women in this country, and the sympathy that we have for young white men, that might be having a bad day or a mental breakdown. We've seen this in the school shooting context for decades now, where they always have some kind of excuse. Well, the trench coat mafia didn't get enough hugs at home.
Yes.
No girls talked to them, so they had to shoot up the school. We've seen this played over and over again to create this level of sympathy, to let them know that it is okay. Their lives exist in nuance. Their lives exist in pixels. Everyone else's life exists in broad brushstrokes created by media narratives, and we have to fight back against that. This is that place where you stand and you fight, and that's why the rally yesterday was so important.
Absolutely. Amen. D. Ray Jones says, remember Dylan Roof taken to Burger King after he killed up everybody in the church in Charleston. Back in a minute.
Are we on Facebook now?
Okay, great. Reverend,
Yes.
remember
Yeah.
when you're
Reverend.
when you're clearing your throat, it's very loud. Okay.
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 Reverend, I just, just 2 minutes ago, I got a call from WBBM. They wanted to know if the church event today was indoors or outdoors, because they said if it was indoor, they probably have to do a pool.
But
indoors, it's a church service.
well, is it
Right,
so?
well,
Is the
some
service going to be
church-
indoors or outdoors? Do you know?
Yeah, some churches are doing it outdoors these days. And it's cool up here indoors, I hope.
I don't know.
Well, we'll see.
Well, no, they need to know before. Should they call Chenta?
We don't know. And
Well,
the thing is that we're invited, we're going. I assume it's going to be inside. I don't know.
Do you know the name of the church, Reverend?
If you're not Methodist Church in Wheeling, I don't know.
United Methodist
Yeah.
Church in Wheeling. Okay, I
Uh-huh.
guess Frank, they should call that church and find out how, or maybe go on their website and see how they're conducting services.
Okay.
Yeah, because Reverend, because that's a question that people have nowadays, particularly as
Okay.
things reopen, and that's a question you need to ask before you go into places, because even though you've been vaccinated fully, you can still contract coronavirus and you can still spread it. COVID-19, you can still spread it. So this.
I need to go momentarily. Sister Pie.
Okay. Grace?
Yes.
This is Grace Pie. Mm-hmm. If you can, let's put up tomorrow if we can. I want to release you guys, okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Noon tomorrow won't work for me, but I'll connect with Santita to figure out a time.
Okay. We do that, and I will as we do that, I'll connect you with his office so you can get but we will connect you to Reverend. Okay.
Well, it's good time for you, Pie.
Sounds great.
Reverend, so you have to leave now?
Momentarily.
Okay. What time? No worries, Daddy. What time do you need to? You need about 5 minutes here, so you can say what you need to say and then go.
That's right.
Okay, very good. Stand by. Hey, everybody. One love. Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. Reverend Jackson will be at the United Methodist Church in Wheeling, Illinois. It's a Korean American congregation, and he's going to be there in solidarity with them. They've invited him out there, and we're so grateful that they've invited him, and so grateful that God has given him the strength to go to speak to this congregation to bring comfort, because a lot of the people who were killed in Atlanta in this massacre, in these massacres, they were Korean American. They were part of the AAPI community. Reverend Jackson, what do you want to say today?
We're affirming the human race. We're affirming the human race. Racism is a mental disorder that affects the mind in such a way you cannot see other people. You see them through a keyhole, not through a door. Racism is unscientific, politically divisive, it is economically exploitative. It has a blinding effect. You cannot see the good in other people. Racism is a mental disease, and there is no pandemic. It's a pandemic, but there's no vaccine being created. So in a racist culture, you get privilege and power with the sickness. So we must fight the sickness and take it seriously as we fight it. It's not good for people. It's like you're going to a racist river. You got racism in you, but do you go with the flow, or do you try to swim upstream? And there are those who swim upstream to break the back of this thing. The 8 families in Atlanta, they have our prayers today. We share with them as best we can. We love them and use this moment to pull together Asian Americans. Renewed sense of joy in the fight. Join the Rainbow Push Coalition. Let's together make it happen. There's nothing we cannot win if we do it together. Nothing we cannot win.
Amen to that, Reverend Jackson. I mean, and everybody keeps bringing up Daryl. Brought up Dylan Roof. I mean, that is what is, before I go to the callers, Grace Pie, I think, and everybody, you can react to this. Grace Pie, after the massacre in the black church, the historic black church in Charleston, South Carolina, Dylan Roof walked in calmly, sat in their midweek service, and then stood up and started killing everybody he could see, and then walked away. And then when he was arrested, he was hungry, and the police took him to Burger King so he could order Whoppers. Wow.
It's just, yeah. I mean, what can you,
Well, Grace, before
what
you
can you
react,
say?
Reverend, you want to react before you go?
Rittenhouse killed people in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
His mother brought him in the state. He walked by the police with loaded guns. Took him back out the state, back to Illinois.
Oh no, they gave him water first because he was thirsty.
Yeah.
Oh, Grace, Reverend, we're going to let you go. We love you. And of course, today at 11 o'clock, we'll be at the United Methodist Church in Wheeling, Illinois. Korean American congregation, everybody who's in this area, please go out there. Even if you're not a member, go out there and express your solidarity and love for our Korean brothers and sisters, for our Asian community. Love you, Reverend.
Love you, family.
Love you very much. Grace, I mean, a Burger King, a Whopper, you shoot people up in, what is it, up in Minneapolis, and you get some water because it's, of course, it's a hot summer night. I mean, Grace. And then here,
Right.
this man was having a bad day, and he's a kid. Oh, okay.
Right. Completely. I mean, it's almost unbelievable, when we are talking about it in these ways, but it's the pattern that is so deeply concerning, right? This is not a one-time, one bad apple, in the Atlanta Police Department that's saying these things. This is a persistent and systemic problem across all of our institutions of policing, and of just, an illustration of how white supremacy has infiltrated so deeply our society. And I think this connects a lot to what Robert said before. There's this, humanization of the killers and the sympathy that is only possible alongside the dehumanization of the victims. And I think it's really telling that when the victims and people targeted are people of color, like with Dylan Roof and targeting the black church, and, like this case in Atlanta and the targeting of Asian American women, that's when we see the victims dehumanized. You know what I mean? And I think that's part of this insidious nature of white supremacy, and in convincing people, the broader public, that these people deserve sympathy without at all lifting up or sharing with nuance, the lives of the people who died and who were murdered. And so, I think that, one thing that really stood out to me is what Robert mentioned earlier about how our society thinks about and treats sex workers. I mean, this was an intentional choice, by media, to repeat these kind of baseless claims from the police. And it casts all of the victims in this light that is consistent with how Asian women have been sexualized and treated and dehumanized throughout our history. I think it's no mistake, and it's a reason that we need more Asian Americans and just people of color in general reporting these stories and in these newsrooms and pushing back against these narratives, in these ways that these really harmful stereotypes are perpetuated. Because I think, one thing that happened that I saw that was reported in Korean language media, in a local Korean newspaper in Atlanta, was they got a quote from an eyewitness who survived, who said they heard the killer say, "I'm going to kill all Asians." That was reported nowhere in mainstream English language media.
Nowhere.
In the first 2-3 days. Nowhere, right? People were saying, police, they can't say whether this is racially motivated or not. And it's there was an eyewitness there who heard him say that. Why weren't these other publications able to talk to that witness? And, my guess, of course, I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that that person gave that quote in Korean. That they were at that neighboring Korean spa. They gave the quote in Korean, and there was no other reporter who wasn't from a Korean newspaper who even thought to ask or could get an interpreter to translate for them. You know what I mean?
Grace, it's the incuriosity. You know that you don't speak the language, then you get someone who does. That's
exactly.
Simple. I mean, the fact that they were so incurious, the fact that even in a play at sympathy, the presumptions, I kept hearing in mainstream media, oh, we're not going to name the victims because we're not going to engage in victim shaming, implying so that we could infer that these were prostitutes or sex workers. Now, if they were, you still don't kill them. But that was
Exactly.
not the case. I mean,
Exactly. Well, and I think, I think about my grandmother who goes to a 24-hour Korean spot every week, and like the Korean spot is kind of a sanctuary for me. If I have a really stressful week at work, that's my refuge. And that to think that, it's being cast in this way, implying that sex work happens there. And again, it's fine if it did, but it plays into, I think we have to acknowledge and be aware of the stereotypes surrounding these businesses. It makes this, it suggests that no Asian massage parlor or spa is a legitimate business. And that's ridiculous. There are so many hardworking families who have built these really strong small businesses in our communities that people go to. I mean, like you mentioned before, the married couple that went for a date, a massage date. I mean, like, these are really, I think, important pillars in our communities, right? Businesses that are providing for families. And just for them to be kind of cast in this light, cast as illegitimate or as, places of moral corruption or whatever. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And it's really harmful because it plays into these societal narratives about Asian American women that have existed for centuries.
let me go to Fred from LA. Fred, what's your take on all of this?
Hello, Santita,
Hey,
to your
Fred.
father, Grace, and to your panel. My take on it, two observations. One, you guys already caught that the authorities are trying to downplay it, saying that he had a bad day, which leads me to number one. Nobody's pointed out, if this wasn't racially motivated, then all the victims would have been white women. You follow me? Yeah, all the victims would have been white if it wasn't racially motivated.
So, Fred, what is the pushback on calling this a hate crime, do you think?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I've been to Atlanta before. It doesn't seem like it would come from a place like that. I mean, I saw you said Captain. I saw him on TV more than once.
Mm-hmm. They've pulled him off now because they said, and C.K. Hoffler, he still has a job.
Yeah.
But he was embarrassing them. I mean,
Very
what did you, when you heard him say, this guy, he was having a bad day, and what else did he say? Wait, because I pulled it out. He was having a really bad day, quote, he was fed up, and quote, at the end of his rope, and he had a sex addiction.
I couldn't tie everything together. I'm trying to tie everything together. Did he have a sexual addiction to Asian women or to all women or to what? Or was this his way of getting back at women? But you still had that racial component in it. Do you follow me?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I follow you, but I don't know what the problem is with law enforcement.
Okay, well, maybe they'll hear your show, Santita, and maybe they'll get clean their act up.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
I heard your show Friday. You did a great job on it. I can't see any. You keep saying the people keep bringing up Dylan Roof. The parallel is almost identical.
When these white men kill people, there's a reason. And when black men kill, there's no excuse.
Okay, I got you. All right, thanks, Santita.
Okay. I don't know any other way to put it, Grace and C.K. Hoffler and Robert Patillo and Frank Watkins. I don't know what else to say. Because when I heard Captain Baker talk about this young man having a sex addiction and he was fed up and he almost shrugged his shoulders and said he was having a bad day. I said, first of all, you talked to him, you didn't shoot him like you do with black suspects. And I don't get this, Robert Patillo. You got to help me with this one. What are you hearing?
Well, I think one, to the caller's point, that they have to understand the distinction between Atlanta and Georgia. Those are two very different places. Most people don't know how to get from one to the other. So once you leave 285 and leave Atlanta proper, it means the largest areas, you're no longer in that shiny city on the hill with diverse populations and progressive voices. You're into areas that, voted for Donald Trump, that voted for George Bush, that voted for many of the Dixiecrat policies throughout the years. So these things aren't as surprising. But the reasoning for the a front of mind thing. He really did see that murderer, and in his mind, he saw a scared young boy who was dealing with a sex addiction that made him plan to buy a gun, to join Facebook groups, to learn and research gun buying, to go to a store and buy a gun, to then go and hunt down Asian women specifically. Because it would be one thing if he just lived in an Asian American community, if he lived on Buford Highway up in Gwinnett County, if he just worked at an Asian spa or went to an Asian school. He had to specifically go out and find and hunt these women down. And the reason that you saw this sympathy from that sheriff is it was uncovered later that he was a hardcore MAGA who had posted anti-Chinese memes a year before, blaming them for the coronavirus and other discriminatory memes. So the reason they don't want to say hate crime because that splashes back on them. Now all of a sudden they have to look and reflect in the mirror and talk about the fact that their actions may have contributed to the atmosphere whereby you can dehumanize a group, that their actions, their quotes, what they think this to be simple fun, as they say, has contributed to the death of people. So if he is guilty, then by association, you agreeing with him makes you guilty. So therefore, he cannot be guilty. It's a strange point of Socratic logic that they've created where they can then make themselves the victim of this because it's not his fault that he had to kill those women. It's their fault because he was addicted to sex and therefore he had to go kill a 71-year-old grandmother in a massage parlor. It doesn't make sense, but it doesn't need to make sense because all they're trying to do is push off the blame from themselves onto some other group.
Well, as Flip Wilson used to say, the devil made me do it. Isn't that what Geraldine used to say? C.K. Hoffler, because I know Grace Pye is just too young to even know what that was. The devil made me do it. Unbelievable. We're going to get closing thoughts from this wonderful panel on the other side of the break. We hope that you will support Rainbow Push 773 Freedom 773 Freedom throughout the week and go to rainbowpush.org. We need your support. But Asian Americans advancing justice, they need your support too. We hope that you will join that cause. We're all one, everybody. We're all one. The National Bar Association, the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world. You need to pay attention to what they're doing because Ben Crump, he's from the National Bar Association. Lee Merritt from the National Bar Association. Johnny Cochran, National Bar Association, may he rest in peace. All of these people, all of these great lawyers are from the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world. And of course, Attorney C.K. Hoffler is the president. We cannot wait for the 20th anniversary edition of A More Perfect Union, Advancing New American Rights, co-written by Reverend Frank Watkins, who's with us today, and former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. Can't wait to have them on to talk about this. And of course, Attorney Robert Patillo, what will you be talking about this afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on WAOK on your wonderful radio show? Enjoyed being with you last week. You're brilliant.
It was a pleasure, and I really do appreciate it. I'm going to drag you back on again. But this week, of course, we're going to be talking about AAPI issues and how it can bridge that black-yellow divide that has developed in our community. And also, we're going to be talking about last week's performance at the Grammys and the over-sexualization of women, particularly women of color, from the WAP performance with some leaders in the community, because I don't think they'll ever let Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish get out there like that.
No.
But for some reason, it's okay when you're degrading black women in that way.
Absolutely. No. First of all, they set their careers up for longevity by not letting them sing those songs, by not letting them perform and to be postured that way. Something to think about, everybody. Closing thoughts on Keep Hope Alive in just a few minutes.
Yeah. One love. What about?
Grace Pye?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, you've been a jewel. I'm coming back to you, and you're going to have a minute to close. And I connected you and C.K. Hoffler.
Right?
Yes.
Yes, I got it.
Okay, because she's someone you should absolutely be in touch with. And because
Perfect, thank
she
you.
is. Oh no. These are all everybody. We're allies. We just have to know that is so. You know, we have to do that. So thank you so much for coming back on today. But,
no problem at all. Thank you for having me.
No. we want to have you on to talk about some other issues too. Because there are a lot of, this is an opportunity for us to come together and talk about lots of issues. Voting rights, so many of the Asian American community were active in the Ossoff and Warnock campaigns. We've got these.
Absolutely. I moved to Georgia for 6 weeks to support that effort. So,
Well, honey, you got to move back. Wait a
well,
minute.
there are great Asian American women who are holding it down in Atlanta.
Well,
doing this outreach into the Asian American community, so I have full faith in that.
Well, you see what they've done. How they're pushing back on these rights, on the voting.
Oh
rights.
yeah, and I think everybody knew that they needed to be prepared and ready for this onslaught on voting rights, curtailment and these restrictions right after the runoff. No matter the outcome, I'm sure, but even particularly in light of Ossoff and Warnock's victory.
It's unbelievable. No, it's not. Let me not say that. It is not unbelievable. It's totally believable.
Mm-hmm.
So totally believable. Totally. So Frank Watkins.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for being with us today. And Robert Patillo, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone will have a minute to close.
Yeah, Robert, you were off the charts good this morning.
Oh, yes.
Appreciate that.
Wonderful. Who is that? Okay, sorry, you guys. I'm trying to do a couple of things.
Robert, did you get the piece that I think Chenta sent out on this anti-Asian stuff?
Yes, we got it and we circulated it.
You got the quote from Alexander Hamilton Stevens?
Yeah, we indeed do.
Yeah. That's the foundation for all of this at one level. I mean, he summarized the era at that time.
Grace? Grace, I'm going to come to you last because that will give you it'll give you a little bit more than a minute, okay? So
Sure.
Frank and Robert, you all will have a minute apiece, okay? Thank you so much.
Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Let us stop the hate, stop the violence against everybody. And we see our AAPI brothers and sisters this past week, 8 of them killed. Well, there was a white woman who was killed, but what is going on in the world? Let us get some closing thoughts from you, Reverend Frank Watkins.
Well, Trump is correctly associated with all of this anti-Asian violence because of his propaganda about the coronavirus coming from China and his anti-Asian diversion from Russia. But, it turns out, I believe that the people that were assassinated and killed, murdered in this incident were Korean, not Chinese. Mm-hmm. There has been a 150% increase, 3,800 documented instances of anti-Asian violence, primarily directed at women and the elderly, that's been reported over the last year. It's interesting to me that it's little known, but the fastest growing immigrant group in America today are Asians.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Robert Patillo, your closing thought?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that we progress best in this country when you have a united coalition. One of the more troubling things that we saw after this incident were individuals in the Black community and the Hispanic community asking, "Well, why should I care about the Asian American community? What have they done for us?" And we have to get out of that mindset, understand the combined history that all of these groups have, understand that we were placed together by a overall governmental structure which worked to segregate and to discriminate against all of us, and that we work strong while working against that power structure and in the best interest of the majority of the American people.
Grace Pie, your closing thoughts. We've covered a lot of territory today. We've covered what happened in Atlanta. Then we went over to Charleston and Dylan Roof being taken to get whoppers after he killed all of these worshipers in the Black church. And on and on and on it goes. The hypersexualization of women. There's just so much to say. This particular tragedy has brought up so much pain and so many issues, and yet it's bringing us together. Grace Pie, your closing thoughts.
Right. I mean, I think the thing that stands out to me is just the commonality of our experiences as communities of color. You know, that Asian Americans are being targeted right now in this moment in a way that, is unprecedented, but that, the Black community knows what we are going through now and has known that for centuries. And so, the theme to me is that the violence that we've seen in Atlanta, but also in other places, is the direct result of racism and white supremacy and structural sexism and misogyny, right? The fact that so many of these shooters and killers are young white men, I think speaks to, what we're teaching white men as a society that they are entitled to do. And that includes, for so many of these cases, like taking the lives of others. And that is just something that we need to stop. And I want to echo what Robert said, that the solution here is to come together to end racist violence in all its forms, right? That looks like building these bridges, continuing to build these bridges across racial lines when our most vulnerable community members are targeted. And, I was really heartened. I am really heartened by this cross-racial solidarity that we've seen this week and that we saw last summer too, during the uprisings all across the country, that we were seeing Asian Americans showing up for Black lives, that we were seeing, Latinx and Indigenous and other people of color showing up for Black lives. And I really want us to continue that, right? That is the only way that we will end this violence. We can educate each other, show up for each other, and really put that solidarity into action.
And stop seeing each other as the other, but as our sisters and brothers. That is the key.
Absolutely.
We've all gone through the same thing, and we continue to go through the same thing. And if we decide that we're going to come together, and if we see each other in each other, if we see ourselves in one another, we're going to stand together and we're going to defeat all of this hate. And we're going to, answer all of this hate with more and more love, with the love force that Dr. King talked about. And so, everyone, just be prayerful for our brothers and sisters in Atlanta and our AAPI family all over the country and all over the world who are being attacked. We're all being attacked. When one person is attacked, we're all attacked. Think about that, everybody. Please give us your support at Rainbow Push, 773 Freedom, rainbowpush.org. And until next week, may God bless you. And remember, keep hope alive. Thank you for listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit our website at www.keephopealiveradio.com.
Grace Pie, thank you so much. And I'm saying goodbye to my Facebook people. I love you. I love you. I love you. Love you, Carol. Love you, Vicky. Love you, Francis. Love all of you. Grace, you want to say goodbye to everybody on Facebook?
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you. Love you all, everybody. But thank